Welcome. Oh. Tonight, allow yourself to drift gently into the folds of time. The world slows down, your breath evens out, and the distant echoes of history begin to softly hum in the background. Imagine yourself in a land of vast mountains and wide plains, where icy winds sweep across barren landscapes, where emperors dreamt in stone and laborers toiled beneath the weight of those dreams. We begin. In the stillness of the night, we'll uncover the quieter truths behind one of history's grandest structures, and the lives lost in its shadow. Close your eyes if you wish. Let the noise of the day fall away. In 200 BCE, you would be wrong to say that China was unified. Sure, the Qin dynasty had defeated its rivals and now ruled from the capital of Shenyang. Sure, they had implemented many policies which attempted to bind the disparate regions together, such as coining a new currency or standardizing weights and measures. After all, isn't that what the wall is supposed to be? A defensive fortification? Under this system, peasants were required to work for the state for up to a month out of the year. The initial plan for the Great Wall was to connect existing walls built by various states throughout northern China. The land had high peaks and deep valleys, so all the builders had to do was put up some structures and guard towers at the tops. Here, the terrain was so dry and barren that there were very few trees to use as timber, and this is where the forced labor starts to get real ugly. See, these workers weren't paid for their labor. Oh no. Instead, they received room and board. As we discussed in another episode, this wasn't great as food supply to the work sites was often limited. Plus, since the wall cut right across China, the climate varied wildly along its length. While the eastern portions were at least temperate, the western sections could get brutally cold during the winter. To make matters worse, the emperor cared more about the wall staying upright than protecting his workers from the elements. Walls were prioritized over shelters. Many workers died from cold exposure. Without wood, the workers couldn't construct sturdy towers or scaffolding. The emperor cared deeply about productivity, so much so that he sent inspectors along the wall to check up on the workers. These men carried whips and used them liberally on anyone who wasn't working hard enough. It's rumored that if you performed poorly, you'd be buried alive within the wall. Now, this probably didn't happen all that often, but it makes sense why rumors like this spread. After all, the workers were buried inside the wall. If someone messed up, it would be easy for the overseers to blame them and bury them inside the wall. Dead wood needed to be replaced, after all. They also couldn't dig out the foundations properly. The whole structure started to collapse. It was said that every brick had to be individually accounted for. Can you imagine the level of paperwork that created? To this day, the Great Wall of China is considered one of the world's greatest engineering feats. It protected China for centuries and changed the country's history. But behind this feat was a darker story of forced labor and death. When the emperor heard about this, he ordered them to stop building and start reinforcing. Stories of hardship, loss, love, hope, and despair. And while the Great Wall of China is one of the world's greatest tourist attractions, it's worth remembering that it was built on blood and sweat and tears. The whole wall needed to be rebuilt, and that meant even more labor. This is why the Great Wall of China is famous for its zigzags. These sharp turns aren't military in nature. Instead, they were simply built this way to make the wall longer. By forcing it across valleys and hillsides, workers added miles to the structure without actually covering much ground. However, once they reached the lands further to the west, the terrain became flat, dry, and rocky. The workers essentially had to carry the wall across the entire northern part of China. And to make matters worse, the emperor wasn't satisfied with a simple stone wall. He demanded that large parts of the structure be made of tamped earth. This involved digging up dirt, tamping it down to form a thick wall, then piling up huge rocks on top of it. Of course, doing this manually was extremely hard. Workers basically had to trudge along carrying buckets of dirt and rocks and stack them upon the growing wall. This type of work often required multiple layers of laborers. First, the logistics team would have to trudge back and forth from the nearest source of dirt. Then the tamping team would have to flatten it, and finally the stacking team would have to add the protective layer of stones. You can imagine how long this process took and how sore their backs got. But then the emperor decided to make it longer and grander than anyone had ever imagined. And this is where things get really nasty. Since the original plan wouldn't require as many workers, Those drafted for the project could probably handle it without too much issue. But when the wall was being extended across the barren lands of the Shanxi and Gansu provinces, that's when things got tough. This time was split into two periods, usually at the end of spring and end of summer. The state would tell the local lords that they needed so and so many men for building projects, road maintenance, irrigating canals, or whatever else. And the local lord would then draft able-bodied men from his villages. So while the workers might not have been soldiers, they still had to be fit enough to handle manual labor for long periods of time. Well, not quite. See, the truth is that the majority of workers were peasants. Peasants who were conscripted by the state and forced to work on the wall. And to better understand this system of forced labor, let us talk about taxes. Not just taxes like you know them, mind you. We're talking about the ancient Chinese version of taxes. But any true unification of the Chinese people was still decades away, a long way away. The rough lands of the West would not fall until the Han Dynasty nearly a century later. And even then, it would be only partially unified. However, there was one thing that did successfully unify much of the empire: work, labor. That is what truly made the Qin a dynasty for everyone. The new emperor, Qin Shi Huang, seemed to find personal joy in making his subjects toil. And boy, did he have them toil. His most iconic and obnoxious construction project was the Great Wall, an extravagant series of fortifications meant to keep out Jiannu raiders from the north. To understand how massive this undertaking was, let us look at some of the numbers. Over 2,000 miles of wall was constructed. That's nearly 3,200 kilometers. In total, it took 7 years to complete, beginning in 206 BCE and ending in 161 BCE during the project. Tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of laborers died. But who were these workers? Often when we look back on the Great Wall today, we imagine them to be soldiers. You see, in this time period, the Chinese didn't use coinage to tax their population. They used labor. It was called laojia, literally meaning old family. The trouble was, Qin Shi Huang wanted a lot of work done. There were some areas along the wall where the terrain was easy to fortify. When the wall eventually passed through the modern-day province of Gansu, things got even worse. In the end, the wall went on for so long that it was impossible to see the end from anywhere along its length. That's not all. By the end of the construction, the emperor was so proud of his wall that he sent officials to count the number of bricks within it. It's important to remember that behind every great construction project, every great piece of infrastructure, there's a human story. Thank you for watching. As the Great Wall took shape, so too did the machinery behind it, not of stone, but of scrolls, seals, and silent decisions. The imperial bureaucracy of ancient China was vast, precise, and, in its own way, merciless. You were not just a worker. Your village's grain yield was tallied, your age was noted, your family situation filed away. You were a record. A name inked onto bamboo slips by unseen hands in a distant prefecture. That was enough to classify you as expendable labor. It is the job of the bailiff, the local functionary, to read the quotas. And if the region was behind on its human contribution to the wall, someone must be sent. Then your punishment was already decided. Names were pulled. Not at random, but by logic. Cold logic. Were you unmarried? You were chosen. A duty to the state. Were you in debt? Even better. The imperial system prided itself on order, not mercy. Their ink was ground with care, their brushes trimmed to perfection. But their work followed you, paper ghosts, shaping your fate from afar. Were you a petty criminal? You had no appeal? Some clerks-educated men who had passed grueling civil exams sat for hours writing edicts in beautiful, even calligraphy. And with those brushes, they doomed lives. Not out of cruelty, but out of duty. A duty to the emperor. As you labored, you likely never even saw the men who signed the scrolls that placed you there. This was not personal, it was administrative. In the dusty government offices of Chang'an or Luoyang, as far from the wind-blasted mountains, scribes logged deaths, shortages, shipments of grain, stone, and bodies. You disappeared into their system like water into sand. They wrote with great seriousness, some even with pride. The wall, after all, was a national project. an imperial dream. And bureaucracy was the spine of that dream. No rebellion, no resistance. Because to question was to risk your position, your family's standing, even your life. Just a slow tide of forms, reports, inspections, and silence. Some bureaucrats perhaps questioned what they were part of. Most did not. So they filed the slips, they ordered the transfers, and they never looked back. As for you, they weren't supposed to be buried there. The men who built the Great Wall were not noble warriors or revered scholars. They were peasants, conscripts, convicts, and they died in the shadows of the stones they hauled. And yet under the very wall they labored to raise, they now rest. Not in tombs, not with markers, just bones, silent, scattered, and mostly forgotten. For centuries, stories pass between generations. If you die on the wall, they'll build over your body. The mortar is mixed with blood. You'll never go home. These weren't just tales. Skeletons curled awkwardly, limbs twisted, with no grave goods, no markers, no ceremony. In the past few decades, archaeologists digging near long-abandoned wall sections in Gansu, Hubei and Shanxi provinces have made chilling discoveries. Shallow graves, sometimes within the foundation stones. Some died from blunt trauma, spines compressed from load after load of stone. Others show signs of severe malnutrition, teeth worn down from sand. And there are thousands of them. Some believe over 400,000 workers died building the various sections of the wall over the centuries. But official records? Silent. The ancient dynastic scrolls praise the greatness of the wall, its strategic importance, its imperial glory. But few mention the men who bled into its mortar. That's it. No names. No details. One report from the Han Dynasty notes an unusually high attrition rate during the fortification of the northern ridges. Even when remains are uncovered today, identifying them is nearly impossible. Most were peasants, illiterate, their names not recorded, their lives erased. And still, the stories echo. In small villages near ancient wall sections, locals still say prayers for the wandering spirits of the wall. They light incense, they leave bowls of rice. Because even if the emperors forgot them, the earth did not. As you shivered in the wind, hauling stone with frostbitten fingers, someone else was writing poetry about your sacrifice. Far from the dust-choked construction sites of the Great Wall, deep in the lacquered halls of Chang'an or Beijing, lived the men who ordered the wall's creation, and never touched a single stone. Imperial officials, court nobles, and educated mandarins discussed border security while sipping warm tea. They called it defending civilization. You called it breaking your back. To them, the Great Wall was a symbol of unity, of strength, of order. A massive stone metaphor. But for the elite, that symbol was clean, silent, and distant. They never tasted the mud. They never buried a friend in a trench by moonlight. They never waited for a cart of spoiled rice that wouldn't come. In detailed court records from the Ming Dynasty, officials debated whether to increase grain allotments to wall garrisons. It's not for the laborers, but for the commanders stationed nearby. The generals got fresh robes and wives. The workers got lice. In the Qing period, noble families held festivals to honor military achievements. Fireworks lit the sky while hundreds of miles away, conscripted peasants froze guarding empty watchtowers. Even when tragedy struck, a collapse, an ambush, a blizzard, the reports sanitized the losses. Minimal disruption. Project remains on schedule. No noble casualties. But some glimpses break through the silk curtains. Their eyes are dull. I fear the cold has stolen their spirits. One nobleman wrote in his diary after touring a wall garrison, "They look more beast than man." Still, nothing changed, because for the elite, the wall was finished when the final ceremony was held. But for you, the wall was never finished. It lived in your spine, your scars, and your dreams. And when night fell and the wind howled through the watchtowers, you could almost hear them laughing, safe behind their painted screens. As you lie back and reflect, the grandeur of the Great Wall fades not into silence, but into the quiet footsteps of the countless forgotten. The workers, barely more than shadows, left no names, but their sweat became stone. Their calluses, the mortar, their pain, a monument. The wall is no longer just a line in the earth. It is a line between remembered and forgotten. From dusty trails of laborers to palace halls of emperors, from ghostly myths to cracked bricks unearthed by archaeologists, we've walked along that wall tonight, not as conquerors or historians, but simply as listeners. So now, let the stones sleep. Let the past settle like dust. And if you drift off now, you're not escaping history. You're joining its rhythms low, steady, and echoing far into the night. Good evening, tonight. Let us turn the pages of time back to the dim, echoing halls of medieval monasteries and candlelit scriptoria, a world of ink-stained fingers, softly whispered Latin, and the quiet devotion of those who labored not with sword or plow, but with quill and parchment. A history that does not shout, but waits patiently to be read. This is not the history of kings or conquests. It is the history of silence, of repetition, of prayer and precision. We'll follow the thread of a single scribe's day step into the inner world of a visionary. Abbas trace the mysteries of an unreadable book and finally wander through the hushed sophistication of one of medieval Europe's most refined courts. As we settle in, we'll explore what it truly meant to live a life of letters. Take a deep breath. Let the flicker of candlelight soften the edges of your thoughts. Hey, the world outside can wait. Tonight, we begin a different kind of journey. Welcome to my channel. Today we are exploring the baths of Caracalla, a relic of ancient Rome's former glory, and today the setting for our first episode of Life in the First Person. These baths were massive, but not unique. Across the Empire of Rome, thousands of people of all social classes would have frequented baths like these, called thermae. The word refers to a building housing both a bathhouse and a gym. Here, the rich and poor alike could come together and enjoy themselves. Though the more well-off might avoid the busy times or pay for private rooms, there was usually another warm room after the hot room, but it's unclear if this bathhouse featured a second tepidarium. They were also a social occasion. While some scholars believe patrons might have covered themselves with oil or fat for modesty's sake, nudity was common. Nakedness was seen as healthy, both physically and morally. Marble pillars and vaulted ceilings disappeared into the gloom. The faces of other patrons were etched with pleasure and relaxation, drink, and even guarded the patron's belongings. For women, the baths provided a rare space of relative autonomy. Slaves would have been assigned to clean the patrons and scrape them with a strigil, a curved blade attached to a handle. They would cover their bodies with a thin layer of oil and remove it with a scraper to get rid of dirt and dead skin. Slaves also had to constantly keep the water clean. This was not easy. Or does the thought of shared showers, cramped changing rooms, and dim oil lamp lighting leave you feeling uneasy? You too can support the channel. See you next time. Leave your thoughts below. And next time you feel a little dirty, just remember, you don't have it nearly as bad as someone living in the Roman Empire. The patrons were plentiful, and the water circulated throughout the complex. In order to try and mitigate the filth, patrons would have covered themselves in a thin layer of oil and scraped it off to remove dirt and dead skin. Sometimes urine was used for cleaning as it had a mild disinfectant effect. Slaves would have had to gather the urine in containers, carry it around the complex, and use it for cleaning. While this task may seem disgusting to us today, for Romans it was normal. It was simply part of daily life in the city, according to the historian Mary Beard. The writer Petronius describes the baths as a location where women are allowed to speak their minds freely. So it's clear that although the baths were crowded and steamy, they were still a place of opportunity, business, and chance encounters. It was a melting pot of Roman life. They would have been paid for their work, but likely received a little more than a stipend, which, according to one estimate, amounted to about $35 per year. Another estimate places the amount closer to $90. Either sum is enough to show that slaves were paid for their labor. Senators, statesmen, gladiators, merchants, prostitutes, soldiers, slaves, and freedmen would have rubbed shoulders in the steamy chambers. The age range would have been wide too. Children accompanied their parents to the baths, as did the elderly. A marble bust of an old man gazes serenely out from the ruins of the caldarium. Was this old man relaxing in the baths, or is he merely frozen in eternity at the moment his marble was chiseled? But not enough to suggest they could ever hope to earn freedom. It was a place of business, gossip, and chance encounters. It was a place where the rich and powerful could mingle with the poor and powerless. It was a microcosm of Roman society, a world unto itself. Besides providing a source of income, The baths also provided employment for slaves. Even if many slaves owned by wealthy patrons bathed in private, the great majority of Rome's population bathed in public. As such, owners of bathhouses, taverns, restaurants, and brothels would frequently frequent bathhouses to buy new slaves. In the cold plunge pool, you would have seen the steam rise from the water, obscuring the faces of those who had submerged themselves in its depths. Through the open doors of the frigidarium, you could have seen the courtyard and gardens beyond, beckoning with their promise of fresh air and greenery. The most elite Romans might prefer to bathe in their private homes or in private bathhouses. Those looking for company, or something more, could find it here. However, bathhouses were also popular with homosexuals, who frequented the darker corners. Seeking anonymous encounters away from prying eyes, the Caracalla baths had such a reputation. In the novel, The Golden Ass by Appius, the protagonist initiates a sexual encounter with a young man in the bathhouse, but is interrupted by a surprise attack of lustful old men. But these public baths were used by all levels of society, including slaves. Even though nudity was widespread, you could theoretically have covered yourself with oil. Indeed, the owner of the Caracalla baths built a special hot tub filled with oil for his enjoyment. In the hot room, visitors sat on marble benches heated by the hypocaust system beneath the floor. But it was tempered by the smells of wet plaster, stale urine, and the bodies of countless men and women. The sounds of conversation mixed with splashing water, shouts, and laughter. It was lively, busy, and bustling. The crowds were dense and intimate. Privacy was non-existent. Slaves moved through the crowds freely, offering massages or performing other tasks for their masters. Others watched intently, waiting for their turn for a massage or a dip in the plunge pool. Still others reclined on benches, gossiping loudly about politics or business deals. Hot air circulated through the hollow spaces beneath the tiles and radiated warmth throughout the room. When patrons became too hot, they could plunge into the frigidarium, the cold plunge pool. They would alternate between the hot and cold rooms, plunging pools several times during their visit. These baths would have been visited 2 to 3 times a week, remaining for up to 3 hours at a time. In fact, the rich might own multiple properties near their favorite bathhouses, even if they had their own private baths at home. We are standing in front of the impressive remains of the baths built by the Emperor Caracalla, dedicated to 17 CE during the reign of his mother, Julia Maesa. The design of the Caracalla baths showcases Roman engineering and ingenuity. Warm water from natural springs was pumped via an aqueduct from the nearby baths of Diocletian. Beyond this was the apoditerium, the changing rooms. Men and women came separately, though in mixed bathing was not uncommon. Their hair was shaved once a month, and any new growth was removed. Then patrons wrapped themselves in a towel and passed their valuables to a slave attendant, who would then keep them safe for a fee. Some slaves were trustworthy, others less so. A visitor recorded how he had once lost coins entrusted to a slave who absconded rather than hand them back. Instead, the man attempted to blackmail the patron. It was an unpleasant experience. Patrons often preferred to take valuables like jewelry, money, and clothing home, instead of leaving them in the care of the attendants. Built on the site of former baths built by the Emperor Hadrian and named after the adjacent Via Caracalla, is the street where the emperor was assassinated. This sprawling complex spanned 11 hectares, roughly 27 acres, making it one of the largest bathhouses in Rome, perhaps second only to those of Diocletian. Within the complex were gardens, libraries, reading rooms, fish ponds, restaurants, shops, and even a small museum. As you enter the baths, you pass through a vestibule and then a courtyard decorated with columns and statues. At its center stood an impressive fountain. After divesting themselves of all but their birthday suit, visitors made their way through the tepidarium, the warm room, into the caldarium, the hot room. But baths weren't just for cleanliness. Visiting the baths would have been a sensory experience. The air hung heavy with the aroma of laurel oil, herbs, perfumes, and incense. In the steamy darkness of the hot rooms, you would have strained to see through the haze of moisture hanging in the air. Most visitors would have bathed in the nude, but prostitutes sometimes offered their services in the dark. Shadowy areas of the bathhouses, especially in the dimly lit dressing rooms, slaves were vital to the function of the bathhouses. They cleaned the patrons, poured water, stoked fires, removed ashes, gave massages, served food on average. Male slaves were purchased for household service, while female slaves were generally bought for sexual purposes. The maintenance of the baths was a full-time job. The patron you were sharing these baths with will have come from all walks of life. Ancient Roman baths were not just a place of hygiene, but a social hub where people from all walks of life could come together and relax. So what do you think? Would you enjoy visiting the public baths? And thank you to my supporters for helping to make these videos possible. Let us step out of the scriptorium now and into the life of a woman whose vision stirred the still waters of medieval thought. Hildegard of Bingen. Born in the late 11th century in the Rhineland, Hildegard was enclosed in a monastery from a young age. It was finished sometime around 1345 and was considered a marvel of its age, both for its architectural complexity and its sheer size. Their lessons are engaging and interactive, and since they're designed for lifelong learners of all ages, you don't need a fancy degree to get started. You can learn by doing, not just reading about it. For example, in their engineering fundamentals course, you can take apart a machine to see how each part fits in and use simple tools to design your own contraptions. Writing was a male-dominated field, but with the help of a monk named Volmer, she put pen to parchment and produced texts that were both groundbreaking and controversial. And she proposed that God was not just a being separate from the world, but present in every part of it. There she established a double monastery, meaning that both men and women lived and worshipped together under her guidance. This was a bold move, but it allowed Hildegard to live closer to her work and solidify her place in history. In recent years, there has been a renewed interest in her life and legacy, with several films and documentaries exploring her extraordinary story. As a woman in the Middle Ages, she would have faced significant obstacles in pursuing her passions and making her mark on the world. However, she persevered and ultimately became one of the most influential thinkers and writers of her time. Her story is a testament to the power of the human spirit and the importance of embracing diversity in all its forms. And though she spent most of her life cloistered away in monasteries, her influence can still be felt in the world today. Thank you for supporting our channel and investing in your own learning journey. Whether you want to learn more about medieval engineering, expand your scientific knowledge, or simply engage in some fun brain training exercises, brilliant. .org has something for everyone. So take a break from the ordinary and explore the endless possibilities of online learning with brilliant.org. Again, thank you for watching and supporting our channel. This view is radical for the time, but it paved the way for future scientific discoveries and helped to shift the understanding of the cosmos. If you enjoyed today's content, please remember to like and subscribe. And if you have a favorite medieval accomplishment that we missed, let us know down in the comments. She wrote extensively about the natural world, describing animals, plants, and even celestial bodies with accuracy and wonder. These writings were considered scientific in nature, but she also wove in her religious beliefs, which sometimes led to accusations of heresy. Despite the controversy, her work was widely read and praised. It's so much more than a textbook, so whether you want to understand the engineering marvels built during the medieval period, or learn more about how modern technology works, Brilliance courses can show you how. The builders used flying buttresses to allow the walls to be thinner and the ceilings higher. She wrote more than 70 hymns and liturgical songs, many of which are still sung today. Her music was unique for its time, featuring complex harmonies and unusual intervals that were meant to evoke a sense of the divine. Unfortunately, none of her music manuscripts contain a full composition. Most likely because of the labor-intensive process involved in copying music, she didn't write in neumes, the standard notation of the period, but in a more elaborate style that resembled written language. This made her work more difficult to perform, but it also preserved her music for posterity. Brilliant. Org has also made significant strides in developing artificial intelligence, including some programs that can generate images from written descriptions. Sounds familiar, right? Like an artist in the Middle Ages might envision a painting in their mind's eye, then bring it to life on canvas. Now, instead of a digital brush, an algorithm brings your ideas to the screen. They incorporated new technologies such as the pointed arch to help support these grand structures. and they designed intricate sculptures and stained glass windows to decorate the interior. When she was 42, Hildegard experienced something she referred to as visions. We might call them intense, mystical experiences. They continued for over 10 years, showing her scenes from Scripture and giving her insight into faith and theology. Visions were not uncommon at the time, but Hildegard's were extraordinary. She reported seeing radiant beings that she called unspeakable. She heard harmonies beyond mortal comprehension. She felt a deep connection to the divine. Each cathedral was unique, but together they represented a cultural golden age. Not everyone could read or write, but countless men and women were accomplished craftspeople, and many of them plied their trades within the church. Imagine a stone room, sparse and shadowed, where the sounds of the outside world drift only faintly through narrow slits in the wall. Here she grew, not just physically, but spiritually, meditating, praying, and most unusually, experiencing visions. These were not fleeting moments of imagination. Hildegard described them as powerful illuminations, bright, vibrant, divine. And she did not keep them to herself. With careful guidance from a monk named Volmir, she began to write. Her work spanned theology, natural science, medicine, and music. All in Latin. All in the slow, careful hand of the scribe. Hildegard composed chants and hymns unlike any other soaring melodies, with unusual intervals. She saw the divine not just in Scripture, but in the patterns of nature, in the rhythms of the human body. Her visions, she believed, were messages not for her alone, but for the world. Still, she lived most of her life within convent walls. She founded her own abbey, wrote extensively, and corresponded with popes and emperors. Yet she remained bound by the silence and structure of monastic life. Her voice, though powerful, flowed from a cloister. She was a mystic, yes, but also a scientist, a writer, a composer, a woman whose thoughts slipped through the narrow gaps allowed by her time. And just like the scribes who copied her works, Hildegard worked slowly, steadily, surrounded by the soft candlelight and cool stone of a medieval monastery. We often think of the Middle Ages as a time when life was hard, knowledge was scarce, and the church held enormous sway over every aspect of daily life. Though that's certainly true, it was also a time when many people, men and women alike, devoted their lives to beautiful and important work. It might be easy to assume that, since the vast majority of books were religious in nature, everyone was consumed by thoughts of sin and damnation. But this wasn't necessarily the case. Those who lived during the medieval period still enjoyed good food, friendships, and stimulating conversations, much like we do today. They had hobbies and favorite pastimes. In other words, they were real people trying to get by in their time. They may have disagreed with our ideas about what's important, but they weren't necessarily dim-witted or superstitious. Sometimes they even managed to accomplish great things despite living in an age that often tried to hold them back. Take, for instance, the builders who designed and constructed cathedrals like Notre Dame de Paris, which took over 200 years to complete. But how could you learn these skills thanks to Brilliant.org? You can explore the building blocks of everything from ancient Rome to quantum physics. Now let's go back to the Middle Ages. Like those cathedral builders, Hildegard von Bingen pursued her passions despite considerable obstacles. Though she died almost 900 years ago, her legacy continues to inspire. Most mystics kept their experiences to themselves, but Hildegard was different. Hildegard was one of the first to suggest that the universe was created by a single force. When she was 67, Hildegard became the abbess of a small monastery in a village called Rupertsberg. In addition to her theological and scientific writings, Hildegard was also a prolific composer. Over the centuries, Hildegard's work has been rediscovered and celebrated by musicians and scholars alike. Hildegard's life was shaped by the limitations placed on her by society. By sponsoring this video, Brilliant.org has enabled us to take a closer look at medieval life and the accomplishments of a truly remarkable woman. And with that, it's time to wrap up today's episode. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night gasping for breath. Your heart pounds like a drum solo. You stumble to the window. Outside, the sky is black, ripped open by flashes of lightning. Thunder rumbles like an angry god. Just then, a blood-curdling screech splits the air. Something about the storm feels different. Primal fear grips you. Those who converted were baptized by dipping their heads in blood. Could this gruesome event be where the infamous blood drinking originated? Or is it just another attempt to paint Dracula as a monster? The truth is lost to history, leaving us to grapple with these unsettling questions. He was born in France in 1593, the son of a wealthy family. But it's what he did next that turned heads. Our story begins in the charming town of Hamelin, nestled in the shadow of a mountain and surrounded by rolling hills. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss out on future uploads. Thanks for watching, and happy haunting. The year was 1284. Life was peaceful. People farmed, traded, loved, and laughed. Children played freely, their laughter echoing through the cobblestone streets. But peace rarely lasts. Not long after, rats invaded the town. They scurried through homes and shops, gnawing on stored grain, contaminating food and spreading disease. Town officials tried everything to evict the vermin, but nothing worked. Desperate, they turned to an old wives' tale, summoning a rat catcher from afar. When he arrived, he presented an unusual plan. He proposed luring the rats out of town with a magical pipe. In exchange, he demanded payment, but not in gold or silver. Instead, he asked for every rat he captured. The deal was struck, and the Pied Piper began his eerie tune. Rats emerged from every crack and crevice, following the piper into the river where they drowned. Triumphantly, he approached the town hall, expecting his reward. But something unexpected happened. Officials refused to pay. They argued over the size of the pile, claiming it wasn't as big as promised. The Pied Piper was furious, blew his pipe again. This time, children followed the enchanting melody into the mountains. Parents chased after them, but the Pied Piper played on, leading them deeper and deeper into the mountain's embrace. No child or parent ever returned from the mountain that day. All that remained was the haunting tune echoing in the wind. Locals never forgot. Every June, they held memorial services, releasing balloons and paper lanterns in hopes they'd guide the lost children home. But the truth is, no one knows what truly happened that day. Some say the children simply wandered off, their fascination with the music overcoming common sense. Others blame the Pied Piper, accusing him of foul play. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. He married a woman named Catherine, but soon set his sights on Anne de Paris, daughter of a prominent cloth merchant. Despite opposition, they wed. However, Gilles's marriage wasn't blissful. Soon he was eyeing yet another woman. On Christmas Eve, 1609, Gill visited a tavern owned by Jean Delorme and her sister Parrot. The tavern had a reputation for attracting wealthy young men looking for a good time. Over time, Gill became a regular. Then in 1615, he met Louise de la Chapelle at the same tavern. Their relationship quickly deepened, and soon Gill was spending more time with her than his wife. But how far did their relationship go? That's where things get murky. Some sources claim they were just friends, others hint at a physical relationship. It all depends on how much trust you place in the accounts of those around them. Eventually, Gilles's behavior drew unwanted attention from authorities. On April 16, 1616, he was arrested for indecent conduct after fondling a maid at a friend's home. He spent a few weeks in jail before his father bailed him out. But this marked a turning point. After his release, Giles became withdrawn and obsessed with securing a fortune. According to some reports, he even began dabbling in the occult, seeking knowledge from sorcerers and poison experts. His sister later revealed that he confided in her about planning to kill his wife. He needed her money, and she stood in the way of his new ambitions. His solution? Find someone to take care of her and collect the reward. Soon, Gill met Marie Mandelin, a seamstress and embroiderer, and asked her to move in with him. But it's what happened next that shocked the town. Marie agreed, and the two moved into Gilles's home. Shortly after, Anne disappeared without a trace. Everyone assumed she'd gone to stay with her parents, but no one saw her again. Meanwhile, Marie seemingly took over as mistress of the household, managing finances and even attending social events with guile. People started whispering, did Marie know something about Anne's disappearance? Was she involved somehow? The gossiping only intensified when Anne's skeletal remains were found buried under the floorboards. The case went to court, evidence mounted against Marie, including a torn dress that matched Anne's description. She confessed to everything. Marie claimed she helped Giles bury Anne's body, and testified against him in court. Giles received a life sentence while Marie was released. She eventually married a fellow inmate and lived until 1652. But what did Giles Garnier's sister mean when she said he told her he wanted to kill his wife? You think he acted alone, or did he have help? Let me know your thoughts below. You're not sure why, but something tells you to get away from the windows. Originating in German folklore, it was initially called the Nachtrebu, later evolving into the Hessler, or hay wagon. It was typically depicted as a black cart drawn by 4 horses, carrying 4 sinister riders cloaked in black and wearing tall hats. Its arrival signaled doom, often taking the form of sudden illness or violent death. One historian suggests that the devil's coach horse may have been inspired by Viking funeral practices. The Vikings burned their dead on funeral pyres, placing the body on a boat and setting it ablaze. As the flames grew, the burning boat resembling a coach pulled by fiery horses, it was a ritualistic spectacle that could have left a lasting impression on observers. Another theory attributes the legend to medieval peasants who witnessed nobles being transported to their graves in elaborate hearses. These grand funerals might have seemed like displays of wealth and power, but to the poor peasants, they could have easily appeared as sinister and terrifying. Whether inspired by funeral rites or peasant superstitions, the devil's coach horse took on a life of its own, becoming a symbol of death and despair. People started believing that seeing or hearing the clatter of hooves foretold an impending funeral in their midst. The legend continued, evolving into a terrifying vision of doom. Then it hits. A jagged bolt of lightning strikes the house, plunging it into darkness. Screams pierce the night. Then silence. You wait, listening intently. This image, combined with stories of mysterious deaths, created a chilling narrative that has endured through the ages. So when do you think the legend of the devil's coach horse originated? Let me know your thoughts below. Suddenly, footsteps near. A voice calls your name. Relief floods you until you realize that voice doesn't sound human. You turn slowly, facing the door. It creaks open. A figure steps inside. You can make out twisted features, eyes blazing red. You scream. The creature lunges. Welcome back. Now imagine reading about that in a storybook. I'd think, yep, just another vampire tale. But what if that nightmare was real? What if creatures from your darkest fears stalked the night, preying on innocent souls? Rumors swirled that when Dracula dipped his bread in wine, he dipped it in blood instead. When he hosted feasts, he served blood instead of wine. These stories are likely rooted in a miscommunication. Vlad Tepes may have dipped his bread in blood during communion, a symbolic gesture of Christ's sacrifice, not an act of Satanism. The confusion led people to attribute blood drinking to both Dracula and the devil himself. So did Vlad Tepes really dip his bread in blood, or was this just a rumor? Let me know your thoughts below. More terrifying. What if they walked among us, hiding in plain sight? Enter Vlad Tepes, Prince of Wallachia. He's born in Transylvania. He became ruler of Wallachia in 1448, earning the nickname Dracula due to his noble title Son of the Dragon. He traveled to Hungary, seeking aid against Ottoman invaders. Legend has it that King Matthias Corvinus of Hungary entertained Dracula at his court. This set the stage for rumors that would link Dracula to the horrors of the night. Some say Corvinus's court was initiated into the dark arts of Satanism. Was Dracula involved? Then came the tales of blood drinking, but it gets darker. In 1461, Vlad Tepes supposedly slaughtered thousands of Jews, forcing them to choose between conversion to Christianity or death. Next, let's explore the legend of the devil's coach horse, a horrifying apparition said to foretell death and misfortune. In 1734, a drawing of a coach and horses appeared in a German broadside ballad, capturing the essence of the apparition. And now, let's meet the mysterious figure of Giles Garnier, also known as Bluebeard. Finally, let's dive into the eerie legend of the Pied Piper of Hamelin. If you enjoyed today's scary stories, make sure to check out my previous videos. The road to Poitiers is long. It's been a long journey from the frozen north to the sun-drenched south of France. We've left behind the somber cathedrals of Notre Dame and Canterbury, the echoing halls of the English royal court, twice Queen Consort of France and then of England. She is the mother of Richard the Lionheart and King John. History will remember her for her vast domains, for her tumultuous marriages, for her rebellious spirit. Let us look at how it really worked, how it really felt to live among the delicate trappings of medieval elegance. Their voices rise and fall, weaving tapestries of sound that hang in the vast space. Some nobles clap their hands. Others remain impassive, listening intently. These songs are the expression of a social ideal, an ethic of refined manners and delicate sensibilities. In their verses, knights errant show their devotion by performing for their ladies' amusement. They don't just declare their undying love, they prove it through small acts of service, through demonstrations of skill and valor. It is here that Eleanor receives her most important guests, where ambassadors and visiting nobles are first introduced to the splendor of her court. Sunlight streams through the window, illuminating fine tapestries that cover the walls, their intricate designs depicting scenes from Arthurian legend. Now the flickering light of candelabers dances across the walls, casting long shadows that stretch and distort the familiar furnishings. For Eleanor knows that tomorrow she must don her crown once more and face the challenges of running her vast domain. As night falls, the court prepares for bed. Courtiers wind their way through the labyrinthine corridors of the palace, their footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. Eleanor pauses at the entrance to her bedroom, her hand resting lightly on the heavy oak door. Within, her chamber is quiet and dark, lit only by a single oil lamp hanging from the ceiling. Her gaze can convey volumes. Her smile is a rare and precious commodity. And even her silence carries weight. Power is not just displayed in grand gestures. The Queen's throne is positioned at the head of the table, with her closest advisors and family seated near her. Courtly love is not just a feeling, it is an ethic. Knights must demonstrate their devotion to their ladies through acts of service, through feats of valor, through the creation of art. She knows that soon they will leave this sheltered world behind and enter the rough and tumble of politics. But for now, she savors the sight of her sons playing Knights of the Round Table, their laughter echoing through the halls of her court. It is a delicate dance, a balance of admiration and restraint, of passion and decorum. A world of beauty and power, of refined manners and courtly love, a world where every glance, every word, every gesture is laden with meaning. A world where the most trivial of acts can be elevated to high romance. A world where even a game of chess becomes a battle of wits, a test of strategy and patience. For within this gilded cage of etiquette there is more than meets the eye. Beneath the surface of laughter and song, there is a constant awareness of rank and status. The slightest misstep can lead to ruin. For here, in the heart of Eleanor's court, the rules of decorum are as unbreakable as the bonds of chivalry itself. The rules of courtly love are complex, governing everything from the language used to the actions performed. To err is to risk social disgrace, even to lose one's life. As the meal progresses, conversation flows, but it is never idle chatter. Every word is measured, every jest carefully considered. There are no crude jokes or boisterous laughter here, only polite repartee and witty banter. It is woven into the very fabric of daily life. The soft glow reveals a modest but comfortable bed, draped in fine linens and quilts. Here in the heart of Poitiers, amid the splendor and the intrigue, the Queen's two sons, the future kings of England, are being raised according to the tenets of courtly love. Yes, Richard, the Lionheart and King John are learning the delicate arts of courtly manners. They are tutored in the ideals of chivalry, taught to behave with honor and grace. For Eleanor believes that true strength lies not just in martial prowess, but in the ability to navigate the complexities of courtly life. And so as they ride out to practice their swordplay or rehearse their hunting skills, they are also instructed in the niceties of etiquette. Before they charge into battle, they are taught to compose a ballad or recite a poem. In this strange juxtaposition of violence and refinement, the boys grow into men, preparing not just to rule a kingdom, but to embody the very spirit of courtly love. A small writing desk sits in the corner, its surface cluttered with books and papers. Eleanor enters, shedding her finery and preparing for a night of peaceful slumber. Her dreams are filled with visions of courtly love, of gallant knights and beautiful ladies, of music and poetry, of all that is best and most refined in medieval culture. The air grows thick with the scent of beeswax and wood smoke as servants move about, tending to the royal hearth. Beneath the surface of this refined world, There's a constant awareness of rank and status. Even the most intimate gatherings are fraught with etiquette and protocol. Eleanor's court is a microcosm of medieval society, and here the rules of decorum are followed with military precision. Eleanor finds comfort in the warmth of the fire, its crackling flames a soothing backdrop to the quiet murmur of conversation. As the queen enters, all eyes turn to her, acknowledging her regal presence. He must announce himself before he enters, his identity known beforehand to the queen's attendants. Upon entering, he dismounts and gives his horse bridle to a groom, then washes his hands and arms before taking his place in the court. His armor is polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the flickering candlelight as he sits in silent vigil, ready to serve his lady. Her ladies-in-waiting follow close behind, each with their designated role and duties. Knights stand ready, not just to protect the queen, but to uphold the chivalric code that permeates courtly life. Music fills the air as troubadours and minstrels weave their magic, their melodies underscoring the drama of courtly romance. Their songs are more than mere entertainment. They are the lifeblood of this world, expressing ideals of courtly love and knighthood that elevate the mundane into the realm of high romance. Surrounded by her loyal servants and close friends, she feels safe and secure. A heavy oak table stands in the center of the room, surrounded by chairs upholstered in rich velvet. Eleanor sits upon a raised dais. Her throne, a graceful wooden armchair adorned with golden fleurs-de-lis, is the emblem of her royal lineage. Though she is dressed in the height of fashion, her garments are not ostentatious, but rather elegant and refined, befitting a queen who values both luxury and decorum. As visitors enter, they are struck not only by the grandeur of the space, but also by the quiet dignity of Eleanor herself. In this courtly world, emotions must be kept in check. Eleanor takes great pride in her gardens, which are renowned throughout the region for their beauty and variety. Winding paths lead visitors past hedges trimmed into fanciful shapes, through archways draped with climbing roses and honeysuckle, and 2 hidden fountains that gurgle softly in the center of flower beds. Eleanor's favorite spot is a small grotto nestled among ancient trees. Here, sheltered from the sun, she can relax and enjoy the tranquility of nature. Passion is expressed through elaborate rituals, through carefully constructed displays of devotion. Love is proven not by words, but by deeds. And those deeds are often set to music. Few hum along, knowing by heart the verses that tell of brave knights and their impossible quests. She has lavished attention on it, turning it into a jewel of medieval architecture. While the men pursue their business in the outer halls, the queen's private apartments are a symphony of color and texture. Walls are covered with fine tapestries depicting scenes from mythology and romance. Stained glass windows cast rainbows across the floors. Heavy velvet curtains hang at the entrances, softening the light and lending an air of mystery. Furnishings are modest but elegant, with inlaid tables and chairs crafted from dark wood. Soft cushions are placed invitingly on benches, encouraging weary courtiers to rest their bones. Overall, the effect is one of subdued opulence, fitting for a queen who values both luxury and decorum. The exterior may appear austere, but within lies a richly decorated maze of chambers and galleries. When Eleanor moved to Poitiers, she brought with her a retinue of artists, architects, poets, musicians, and they have transformed the city. For Eleanor, courtly life isn't just about politics and power. It is a reflection of her own personality, her own refinement and sophistication. Her court is an extension of herself, a showcase of her intellect and grace. But here in Poitiers, the seat of her power, she is known for something else. For inside these 4 walls, Eleanor has created a sanctuary of art, a haven of refined manners and delicate sensibilities. Here, troubadours sing gentle ballads of longing and virtue. Poets debate the finer points of chivalry. Women lead discussions on love, not just any love, mind you, but the distant, idealized affection of noble hearts. Now the air grows warmer. The scent of orange blossoms drifts through open windows, and yet the illusion of ease can be deceptive. For though there is much laughter, there is also a constant undercurrent of tension. Every glance is weighed, every word considered. Courtly love may be the topic of conversation, but even that must be performed with the utmost care. On silk cushions, lords and ladies sip wine, testing its bouquet and vintage with expert tongues. They're cultured, sophisticated, and they have come to hear stories. For this is the court of Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the most powerful women in medieval Europe. It is easy to imagine that life in Eleanor's court is one of endless revelry, that every day is a celebration of life and beauty. And so while the afternoon sun streams in through stained glass windows and illuminates motes dancing in the air, let us take a moment to consider the court of Eleanor of Aquitaine. In the grand hall of Eleanor's palace in Poitiers, troubadours make their way from table to table. Serenading the nobles gathered there with tales of chivalry and courtly love, troubadour songs like these aren't mere entertainment here. They are the very fabric that holds courtly life together. Poitiers is Eleanor's favorite courtly residence. Much of the interior has been given over to the women of the court. The Queen's solar, or main reception room, a single window dominates one wall, flooding the space with natural light. During the long summer evenings, the court gathers in the gardens behind the palace. When the weather turns cooler, the court moves indoors once more. Yet even in this intimate setting, the weight of courtly life is ever present. But not all is as free as it might seem in Eleanor's court. Within the grand halls of Eleanor's court, a careful hierarchy unfolds. A knight's entrance into Eleanor's court is a carefully choreographed affair. Eleanor's court is a place of subtle power. The Queen, as its head, wields influence with quiet grace. At the royal table, each place is carefully arranged not just for aesthetics but to communicate status. In the world of Eleanor's court, even love is performed. Now gather close, for I am about to share a secret with you. A truth hidden beneath the surface of Eleanor's court. Their mother watches them, a bittersweet smile on her lips. And that is the story of Eleanor of Aquitaine's court. And so, as the last candle flickers in the cold stone hall, and the ink dries on the final page of the day, we gently close this chapter of history. The medieval world was not always grand. Often it was slow, repetitive, silent. But in that silence, there was rhythm. And in the rhythm, meaning. Whether you wandered through a scriptorium, heard Hildegard's chants echo through the cloister, puzzled over the Voynich code, or walked carefully through a noble court, you were part of something larger, the quiet persistence of human life. For though their candles burned low, yours can now be extinguished in peace. Now you may let go. Let the weight of history carry you gently into rest. Sleep well. History will be here when you wake. The world of ancient Rome was not only conquest and colosseums, it was aching backs and half-clean water. It was whispered threats and folded tablets. You were in your bed, far from the clamor of togas and curses. It was power masked as stillness. As you rest now, let the steam fade, the marble cool. You are not in the bathhouse. Let history's rhythms become your lullaby. Sleep well. Good night. I don't know about you, but sometimes I could use a nice hot bath, be with a little bubble bath, lavender-scented candles. Okay, yeah, I'm more of a fan of the modern age. Today we're going behind the scenes at an ancient Roman bathhouse. And let me set it up for you a little bit. You're walking down the road. It's been a hot day. You're dusty. You're sweaty. You've been walking for hours and you're looking for a place to wash up. Congratulations. You've just entered the apoditerium, the changing room. This is where patrons came to shed their outer garments, leave them with a slave, and then proceed further into the baths. It's the caldarium, or the hot room, and it's probably the place you've been dreading. Here, the air is thick with steam. You can barely breathe. The baths are a social event, a time to rub shoulders with people from all walks of life. They're also a time to get clean, sort of. The water isn't exactly fresh, and the only thing more prevalent than body odor is the smell of stale urine. If you can make it through the baths without catching an infection, you're doing well. For the average Roman, the baths are a necessity, not a luxury. They're a place to clean up, socialize, and maybe catch a glimpse of someone special. They're also a place of business. A lot goes on in the baths. You never know who you'll run into. The ceiling drips constantly, and the marble benches are too hot to sit on for long. Remember, if you liked it, hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. Also, thanks to our supporters for making videos like this possible, and thanks to you for watching. See you next time. The whole room is designed to induce sweating, and it does its job all too well. If you're not careful, you'll overheat and pass out right there in the middle of the caldarium, so take it easy. Sip some wine, chat with a friend, and try not to pass out. A quick tip, If you're in the Roman Empire and you're worried about overheating, don't drink wine. Don't do it. You also want to watch your step. The slaves move around in the shadows, pouring water over glowing stones, feeding the fire under the benches and refilling buckets. They work tirelessly to keep the baths functioning. And the last thing you want to do is get in their way. When you finally decide to leave the caldarium, you're probably pretty sweaty, dirty, and uncomfortable. But hey, you're not alone. Everyone else is in the same boat. But don't get too comfortable, because there's no privacy here. After the intense heat of the caldarium, the frigidarium feels heavenly, though you might only feel that for a second because it's ice cold. There's a reason for that, though. See, you've been sweating in the previous rooms, and that means you're probably carrying a lot of extra weight. Well, at least in the Roman sense of the word. Romans believed that the human body carried impurities, bad humors, and getting rid of them was key to staying healthy. The cold water of the frigidarium was supposed to help with that process. By plunging your body into freezing cold water, you shock the system, forcing it to expel impurities even faster. It works kind of like a modern-day cold shower, except instead of a shower, you're in a big pool. And instead of a few minutes, you're in there long enough to get used to it. But still, though, it's cold. The final room in the baths is the nataccio. It's basically a pool room. Some pools are decorated with statues or mosaics, while others are more utilitarian. But they all serve the same purpose, to give you a place to cool off after the frigidarium. In the summer, these pools are crowded, hot, and stagnant. They're a cesspool of germs, but they're also a place to meet people. If you're single, you might want to bring your charm along with you to the baths, like none. At all, whether you're a man or a woman, you are about to get naked. Absolutely naked. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, senator or pauper, you're shedding everything and everyone. Everyone is naked. Give your stuff to a slave, and you don't get it back until you leave. So whatever valuables you have, they're at the mercy of a slave who might not like you. And if you're wearing fine clothes, well, congratulations, you're about to ruin them. Because while the baths are segregated by sex, they're not segregated by social class. And let's face it, scrubbing naked with other people sucks, especially when those people are smelly and greasy. Oh, and watch your head. If you're tall, you're probably going to bonk it on the low ceilings. Welcome to ancient Rome. They didn't build for your height. Well, good news for you. Here it is. The baths. We're definitely not alone. That would be the tepidarium, or the warm room. It's not hot per se, but it's warm enough to start opening your pores. The idea here is to slowly acclimate your body to heat so that it's ready for the next stage. Now you'll notice a few things about this room. First, the floor is heated from beneath, and that means the heat radiates evenly, which sounds great except it's not. The tiles are old and worn, and some parts are scorching hot, while other parts are downright cold. Add in the fact that people walk around on them barefoot, and you have a recipe for blisters. Second, oil. Everywhere, oil covers the floor, walls, even the ceiling. It drips from the rafters and leaves stains on the whitewashed walls. You see, the oil serves a dual purpose. It lubricates the gears of the hypocaust system that heats the floors. But it also serves as a sealant, keeping the heat from escaping and helping maintain the temperature. It's not pleasant, but it's necessary. Third, the air is thick with conversation. As you navigate the warm floor, you hear snippets of gossip, politics, business deals. Some patrons yell and make rude gestures. Others argue loudly. The baths are a place of business, a place to deal-making, and a place where reputations are made and broken. It's also a place where gladiators come to relax. You might want to watch your step. I wouldn't want to run into Spartacus in the wrong mood. People come to the baths for all kinds of different reasons.
Jeez.
For athletes, it's a chance to soothe their aching muscles after a long day of training. For the wealthy, it's a place to socialize. And for the average Roman, well, it's a chance to get clean. Instead of a luxurious spa experience, we're getting the gritty details. So brace yourself. We're taking a trip back to the 1st century AD in the heart of the Roman Empire, and our stop today is the Thermae. Not the modern spa experience with soft towels and rose petals, but the ancient Roman bathhouse. But imagine if you had to get there without any modern conveniences. No lights, running water, soap. You have only the clothes on your back and your wits to get you through. Imagine being 2,000 years ago in ancient Rome. Welcome back to the channel. We're going to go ahead and step into the scene. As you approach the baths, you probably notice a few things. First, it's huge. I mean, these places were not small. They were massive complexes made of stone. Steam rises from grates in the pavement outside and makes the whole area hazy. You hear the echo of voices drifting from the changing rooms and the scrape of metal tools. But perhaps the most noticeable thing is the smell, a mixture of dust, sweat, olive oil, and something else you can't quite put your finger on. If you had to describe it, it would be the smell of humanity itself, a heady mix of all the things people smelled like at various stages of undress. Now, we're going to go ahead and walk through those big doors and step inside. Now, we're going to go ahead and exit the appetiterium and walk into the next stage of the bath. But it's time to move on. You feel yourself warming up, your muscles loosening, and you head to the next room. The next room is the frigidarium, or the cold plunge pool. And you're going to need it. And finally, you are clean. Sort of by Roman standards. You are sparkling, literally. Thanks for joining us at the Roman Baths. Welcome to the series, where emperors are made and broken. Today we meet a princess who climbed to the heights of Roman power by studying its darkest currents. And today we enter the deadly game of Roman succession with one of the most infamous women in ancient history. All the way to the top, she charted a course through exile, murder, and war, carving out a place no woman had known. This is the story of Agrippina the Younger. When she was 6, her mother, Julia, was exiled by Tiberius, and her 2 brothers, Gaius and Lucius, died under suspicious circumstances. Through her first union, she produced a daughter, Julia Drusilla, and she gained a powerful father-in-law, Marcus Junius Silenus, a senator close to the emperor. She chose her 3rd husband wisely. He was not rich or influential, but he was related to Augustus by adoption. More important, her father-in-law, Marcus, was a trusted advisor to the aging Tiberius. And as if that weren't enough, Claudius happened to be the emperor's nephew. Remember him. He's the one who will become emperor. And in 41, the spoiled prince had Agrippina recalled to Rome, but she was also terrified. After all, Caligula had just murdered 3 of his own uncles and a grandmother. Now he was about to meet his aunt and her son. What if he decides to make them into martyrs as well? Her husband was related to Augustus. He had been a close advisor to Caligula, and he was popular with the people. But while Agrippina might have preferred a husband as emperor, she got something much better, an emperor closely tied to her by blood, that suited both of them. He loved being emperor, and she knew that the throne looked good on him. Coins minted during Claudius' reign bear his image on one side and a seated goddess on the other, likely Rome itself. But the goddess wears a diadem, a traditional symbol of female authority. Some modern scholars believe that the coins actually celebrate Agrippina, and that's not surprising. So she let him ride high, steering the ship of state from behind the curtain. Well, Roman tradition demanded that a male emperor come to power in his own right, without the help of a regent or a proxy. But Nero loved the woman, and he promoted her to empress. Whether she drowned or was poisoned doesn't matter. Nero killed her. His final words to her, reported by the historian Tacitus, were, "Strike the womb that bore me." This enraged Agrippina, who felt that her authority had been undermined. So she began plotting against her own son. Because in the game of Roman politics, no woman was supposed to win. But the fall of Rome is more than a story of collapse. It's a story of resilience. To survive in a collapsing empire, you had to be adaptable, self-reliant, and strong. And no one embodied those qualities more than the princess who rose to become empress. Yet she rose to the top by studying the darkest currents of Roman society. She endured exile, murder, and war, and in the end, she made an emperor. And Agrippina understood tradition. By allowing her son to take the throne, however symbolically, she gave him legitimacy. He would be the one making decisions, issuing commands. She stayed behind the scenes, yet she knew that Nero would always do what she wanted, since he owed everything to her. She accompanied him to the races and gladiatorial games, and she issued edicts in her own name. And in a gesture unheard of for any woman, she stood beside the emperor during a triumph. And even if she had opposed her husband's rise to power, she couldn't have stopped it. Claudius was the obvious choice. She wanted to refuse, but she had no choice. Finally, Agrippina removed her mother from the equation, having her exiled, then executed. So within a decade, she had eliminated all potential threats to Nero's succession. But Agrippina's relationship with her mother had been strained by Julia's various exiles, and the two eventually broke away from each other. This time, Agrippina had no doubt that her son would take the throne. Unfortunately, he was only 18 years old, and the Senate wanted a regent. Even worse, they wanted someone more experienced than his mother. So Nero became emperor with the title Augustus, but his grandmother, Julia Maesa, served as regent. Then Agrippina stepped in. In January of 42, Caligula was assassinated, supposedly by his own sister. Soon after, the Senate convened to select a new emperor. Agrippina wanted her husband, but she didn't want to be a queen. So she pushed the elder members of the Flavian clan, her relatives, forward. Instead, her cousin Marcus was named consul, but he died shortly after. Then the Senate turned to his brother, the emperor. But here's how it looked in the end. Agrippina's first husband was related to Augustus. Her second husband was adopted into Augustus's family. Whatever animosity they felt toward each other faded quickly, and Agrippina moved into the palace. According to Cassius Dio, Caligula forced her to live with him and prostituted her. However, given the character of the sources, I tend to doubt this story. Her first step was securing her daughter for her son. Caligula had previously married a niece of his, Julia, but the wedding was childless and unhappy. Agrippina annulled the marriage and her daughter returned home. A few weeks later, Nero and Poppaea were married. True though, it shows how dangerous Caligula was. But Agrippina's rise to prominence was halted when Tiberius died in 37 and Caligula took the throne. Though there seems to have been no animosity between them, Agrippina knew she did not fit into the degenerate court of her brother-in-law. So she withdrew, living a quiet life in Egypt, reading books, writing poetry, and producing an heir, the future Emperor Nero. And her third Claudius was Augustus's nephew. So her daughter Julia was connected to Augustus through both her parents. And Nero, her son with her third husband, was connected through his father, mother, and even maternal grandparents. That made Nero a very convenient candidate for the throne. By 29 AD, Agrippina was seeking a new match, and she found it in a member of an old Roman dynasty, the Claudi. Her second husband was Titus Sextius, a widower with a young son named Claudius. Was this an overprotective grandmother eliminating rivals? We don't know. But Agrippina learned that loyalty in the imperial family meant little. It's me. This is the series on Rome. Agrippina was born in 15 AD in the city of Bayeux, not far from Rome. The year before, her father Germanicus had died suspiciously in Antioch, a fact that would come back to haunt her. In the eyes of many Romans, Livia was already too powerful, too controlling of her husband, the emperor, and Agrippina could become a rival, which meant preparation was crucial. Livius gave Agrippina an elite education, instructing her in literature, philosophy, and the arts, making sure she was refined and intelligent, but also teaching her about law, governance, and politics. Livia effectively made Agrippina a mini-empress, training her to run the empire. Her grandfather, Augustus, the first emperor, was probably dead by the time she was 3, so Agrippina knew only her grandmother, Livia, and she knew her well. It was Livia who launched young Agrippina into the adult world of Roman politics, perhaps because of a need to prepare her granddaughter for what might be coming. Or perhaps Livia saw in Agrippina a chance to push her own bloodline closer to the throne. Livia was the mother of the Emperor Tiberius, who had succeeded Augustus. So far, Tiberius had failed to produce a legitimate heir. But while Livia likely recognized the potential in Agrippina, she also posed a threat. Fortunately for Agrippina, she was also trained to expect betrayal. By age 14, she was ready for marriage, a traditional tool of Roman politics. Now, this may seem like a demotion, a step down the social ladder, but this is where Agrippina shows us how she navigated the game of Roman power. In the following years, the imperial family tree got tangled up in more murders and adoptions. Meanwhile, Agrippina's father-in-law Marcus was able to secure the governorship of Egypt for her and her son, establishing a base of power outside Italy. Caligula's reign lasted for years. During that time, Agrippina educated her son, preparing him for the role he was born to play. But Caligula was unpredictable. The next few months were crucial. On one side, Agrippina wanted to bring her son to the capital and position him near the center of power. When Agrippina arrived in Rome, she and Caligula reconciled. Then fortune smiled on Agrippina. For Agrippina, this was a fortunate turn of events. After he took the throne, Agrippina went to work cementing her position. While Agrippina placed herself at the center of the empire, she allowed her husband to bask in the glow of power. Not everyone appreciated Agrippina's handiwork. Rome had never had a female emperor, and some inhabitants complained loudly. As the emperor aged, Agrippina took an increasingly prominent role in public life, but her greatest triumph came after her uncle died. Upon his death, the Senate again gathered to choose an emperor. She demanded that her daughter serve as Julia's deputy, effectively keeping the reins of power in the family. The question is, why? Why hadn't she simply installed Nero as sole emperor at age 18? But their relationship soured when Nero wed Sporus. The freed woman was a former slave, and Agrippina disliked her because, well, she was a nobody. He reacted by throwing his mother into the sea off the coast of Naples. If Agrippina was remembered for nothing else, she would have been celebrated for her audacity. Rome's fall from greatness was a slow decline, marked by civil wars and economic crisis. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to stay updated. And as always, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more. Rome is synonymous with power. Its ruins are among the most imposing sights in the ancient world. But where did this power come from? How did the Romans go from a small Italian village to ruling one of the largest empires the world had ever known? Well, to understand Rome's relationship with the gods, we need to start by looking at their neighbors. The gods, he says, exist not only to be honored by mortals, but also to serve them. This sense of entitlement started small. They gave thanks before a meal and made offerings in the morning. Well, if you want to know how Rome controlled the gods, then you'll have to leave the Senate and the Colosseum behind and venture deep under the city. All you had to do was give them what they wanted. Simple enough, right? Not wrong. You see, the Romans had a problem. But which Mars? Is the Roman Mars, who associated with strategy and planning, or the Greek Mars, whose name literally meant war? When a woman entered wedlock, she expected Juno to watch over her marriage. They celebrated it for an entire week. They didn't just hold games in honor of a particular god. They held festivals that lasted months. If you followed them correctly, the gods would do what you needed. They fixed the number of the gods. They fixed the boundaries of the empire. They fixed history itself. Oh wait, never mind. The series is already renewed. But what about the things that couldn't be fixed? What about the times when the Romans really screwed up? Well, when that happened, the Romans had a solution. Far from the marble halls of the elite, Romans engaged in a different kind of power, one whispered into metal and buried beneath the earth. In temples, wells, and tombs across the empire, archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of thin, folded sheets of lead. Cursed tablets, or defictions. Often etched in barely legible Latin or Greek, they are pleas to the gods of the underworld, requests for vengeance, for justice, or simply for balance to be restored. Imagine yourself in the small temple near Aquae Sulis, modern-day Bath in England. A man's cloak has been stolen. He has no legal recourse. Instead, he scratches a message onto lead. To the goddess Sulis, I give the cloak, and request that the thief be cursed in blood and mind and sleep and waking. The tablet is folded, pierced, and thrown into the sacred spring. Not seen again for centuries, till a team of archaeologists finds it centuries later, darkened with age, but still legible, still angry. Others are more obscure. Curses written backward, names repeated, symbols not yet deciphered. One tablet found in Rome curses a rival charioteer to lose all future races. These were not grand rituals. They were small acts of desperation, personal, petty, precise, and they reveal a Rome far more superstitious than we often imagine, a Rome where the gods were close, and vengeance was a prayer away. If you didn't, they wouldn't. And Romans took that very seriously. Over time, as Rome grew, the number of piacula increased. Romans didn't just write down the piacula, they carved them in stone. They built temples around them. They put priests in charge of them. They made it harder and harder to ignore them. But despite all this, Romans still managed to mess up. Remember Romulus? Yeah, well, apparently his whole founding of Rome thing was against the piacula as well. So to fix that, the Romans changed history. They didn't just sacrifice a pig to appease the gods. They slaughtered entire herds. As you can probably guess, when you triple, quadruple, or quintuple the amount of sacrifices, you triple, quadruple, or quintuple the amount of piacula. The Romans were essentially overloading their gods, and the results were inevitable. Sometimes the Romans simply ignored the piacula. For example, during the Gallic invasion, the Romans killed many unarmed Gallic priests. As punishment, lightning struck down 2 Roman consuls. Other times the Romans appeased the gods by changing their minds. For example, Romulus wanted to sacrifice his twin brother Remus after he made fun of the new Roman state. But before he could follow through with his plan, Romulus was struck with divine madness and backed off. And sometimes the Romans just made stuff up. After Romulus raped the Sabine women to populate Rome, he was criticized by the Romans for ignoring the piacula of the Sabine goddess Angisha, even though nobody could remember what her piacula actually were. But which Juno, the Roman Juno, who primarily concerned herself with women's issues, or the Greek Hera, who viciously punished any human who dared to defy her? Or when someone died, they expected Pluto to guide their soul to the afterlife. But which Pluto? The Roman Pluto, who primarily concerned himself with wealth and justice, or the Greek Hades, who punished those who disrespected him? Romans didn't think about it. They simply assumed the gods would do what they were supposed to do. But the gods didn't always agree, and when that happened, the Romans had to act. They'd taken the traditional Mediterranean pantheon of gods and goddesses and domesticated them. In order to ensure the Romans got exactly what they needed, each god had a list of very specific demands. These demands were called piacula. Each god had her own piacula. And once they were established, they couldn't be changed. So if Romans wanted to propitiate the gods, they had to give Jupiter exactly what he wanted. They couldn't offer Mars something else instead. Now normally, this wouldn't be a problem. Gods are pretty chill. In fact, if you ask the Greeks, they'll tell you gods love gifts. But here's the thing. The Romans didn't do normal things. They did things big. And that came with problems. They turned Zeus, the supreme leader of the Olympians, into Jupiter, the grumpy old man on top of Mount Olympus. They turned Hera, the queen of the Olympians, into Juno, the jealous watchdog of marriage. They turned Hades, the god of the underworld, into Pluto, the silent god of wealth. Essentially, the Romans repackaged these gods and made them Roman. But this had consequences. Welcome to the Domus Transitoria, the place where 2,000 years of history is created every day. You see, the Domus Transitoria isn't a place. It's a community. It's an online portal where you can connect with historians like Madeline Miller, author of Circe and the Song of Achilles; Robert Jones, author of The Hidden Roots of White Supremacy; and Rucker Bregman, author of The Dawn of Everything. They visited temples and participated in festivals. In essence, Romans tried to stay in the gods' good books. Because of their attitude, the gods were obligated to help them. For Romans, the gods were almost like servants, performing their duties, bringing rain when asked, helping when needed, punishing when commanded. If the Romans wanted to be left alone, then the gods obliged. If they wanted advice, the gods offered it. If they wanted someone to blame, the gods were happy to oblige. Romans manipulated the gods into doing what they wanted. They didn't let the gods tell them what to do. In the early days, Rome was a monarchy, then a republic. Citizens took great pride in their freedom and independence. They didn't want a king. They certainly didn't want a tyrant. But they also did and want a god telling them who to vote for or who to go to war with. If the gods wanted to get involved in Roman politics, then so be it. But the Romans would have none of it. They chased away their Etruscan king Tarquinius, Superbus, when he tried to abuse his power and refused to listen to his pleas. They defeated the Gauls who attacked them. They repelled Hannibal and his elephants. And when they encountered other Mediterranean cultures who believed their gods dictated their foreign policy, they laughed. "Look at Athens," said the Romans, so obsessed with their gods that she forgot about the Persian threat until it was too late. Or look at Greece. All those squabbling city-states, unable to unite because their gods were always getting in the way. Rome was surrounded by powerful city-states, all of whom were ruled by kings, tyrants, or oligarchies. These states looked to the gods for guidance and validation. When making important decisions, they consulted oracles, sacrificed animals, and practiced divination to try and figure out what the gods wanted. In essence, they let the gods rule for them. But Romans rejected this idea. They weren't interested in letting the gods decide their fate. They wanted to make their own decisions. and they didn't want divine validation. They wanted divine obedience. History would have us believe that the answer is simple. The Roman emperors were strong. Rome was prepared. The rest of Europe just wasn't. And sure, that's all true, but there's another explanation too. Rome was blessed by the gods. The Romans believed they were chosen. Their attitude towards their relationship with the gods was markedly different from anyone else in the ancient Mediterranean. Romans didn't want to be favored by the gods. They wanted to be in the gods' good books. They didn't build temples for aesthetic or symbolic reasons. They built them because they believed the gods lived inside. They weren't scared of the gods. They knew how to control them. And the gods, in turn, showered Rome with favor after favor. Well, at least that's what the Romans believed. But why? Why did the Romans think they could tell the gods what to do? Why did they think the gods would listen? And why did it work? The Roman attitude towards the gods is summed up best by Livy. But while Romans mocked other cultures for being subservient to the gods, they themselves were anything but. Romans prayed to the gods every day, and that begs the question: how did they manage to control such powerful beings? So the Romans believed that controlling the gods was easy. When the Romans went to war, they expected Mars, the god of war, to be on their side. In order to control the gods, Romans had to give them exactly what they wanted. You see, the Romans didn't just celebrate Saturnalia with one day of feasting and debauchery. These examples might seem small, but they were anything but. The Piacula were the backbone of Roman religion. If there's one thing you should know about the Romans, it's that they're fixers. Now you'll have to wait and see what happens next. It is early morning. The atrium glows with filtered light. Roman senator rises not to labor, but to posture. His toga is prepared by slaves. It is a cumbersome garment, heavy and impractical, but essential. A symbol of dignity and status. The folds must be arranged precisely. He steps into sandals and receives the morning reports. His day is a quiet choreography of appearances. His slaves bring him reports, news of the city, of gossip, crime, politics. But Attaius does not concern himself with any of it until after he has had his morning drink, a bitter herbal infusion. He changes into lighter garments, a white linen tunic and a darker cloak. If he is traveling by foot, these garments allow him to blend more easily into the crowds of Rome. He walks through the arches and colonnades of his property, enjoying the shade and the gentle breeze. The sky turns a deep purple, and the stars start to appear. The senators joke and jest, and even Attaius, normally so serious and reserved, laughs loudly and jokes with the best of them. But even as he enjoys the company of his friends, he is aware that Rome is watching. Every word he says, every move he makes is being watched by rivals and enemies. He knows that one false step could ruin his reputation, and so he is careful. He speaks softly, never raising his voice. He eats slowly, never finishing his plate. He drinks enough to loosen his tongue, but not enough to make him slur his words. He is aware of the danger of excess, and so he never indulges too far. Caius Verus feels the familiar pull of hunger and returns home. The senators begin to talk in low voices, and even the slaves are hushed. Attaius feels the weight of the night pressing down on him. He is tired, not from the day's labors, but from the constant vigilance required to maintain his reputation. He has played his part well, he knows. But the thought of another day of endless courtesies and cautious words weighs on him like a stone. He says his goodbyes and returns home. He slips out of his finery and into a simple white tunic. He washes his hands and face, brushes his teeth, and climbs into bed. The darkness is almost absolute, and the only sound is the murmur of the city. Attaius lies in the darkness, thinking of the day ahead. He knows that tomorrow will be the same as today, a series of endless obligations and empty gestures. But he is content with this. He has lived a good and honorable life, and he has earned his rest. He closes his eyes and sleeps. He orders a simple supper, bread, olives, and fish stew, and eats it slowly, savoring each bite. Afterward, he reclines on a couch in the atrium, sipping wine and listening to music. His slaves have prepared a feast of figs and dates, and he eats them slowly, enjoying their sweetness. But he keeps an eye on the entrance to the atrium. He is expecting guests, a group of fellow senators with whom he will dine. They arrive as dusk falls, and Attaius welcomes them warmly. They are all dressed in their finest robes, and they carry their dinner with them. Together, they walk to the dining room, where a slave has laid out couches and tables. Once seated, they eat and drink, discussing law, poetry, and politics. The conversation flows easily, and Attaius enjoys the company of his peers. He is not so lonely after all. This is the height of summer in Rome, and the sun is relentless. Any exposed skin is met with stinging heat. Attaius, however, does not mind. He walks barefoot and unclothed, his white tunic pulled open to expose his chest and arms to the sun. He closes his eyes and breathes deeply, feeling the warmth on his skin and the wind ruffling his hair. He thinks not of politics, but of philosophy. He is a student of the Stoics, after all, and the Stoics teach that one must master one's emotions. Attaius believes that he has done just that. He has learned to find pleasure in the simple things, to endure hardship with equanimity, and to seek wisdom above all else. As he walks, he reflects on the nature of virtue, on the duty of the wise man to live in accordance with nature, and on the importance of self-control. He knows that these are the qualities that will allow him to endure the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, and to achieve true inner peace. He adjusts his toga again, straightens his belt, and runs a hand over his silver-streaked hair. It is time to visit the Curia, the Senate house. Attaius walks briskly, ignoring the stares and whispers of those who see him coming. His face is impassive, his eyes downcast, his head covered by his toga. The other senators may wish to make a show of their arrival, but Attaius has no interest in drawing attention to himself. He is content to fade into the background, to lurk at the edges of the grand halls of power. Once inside, he finds his fellow senators already engaged in debate. They argue loudly, gesticulating wildly with their hands in robes. Attaius watches them for a moment, half amused, half disdainful. He knows that most of the debate is for show, that real decisions are made not here, but behind closed doors. Still, he takes his place among them, listening, nodding, saying little. He understands that the appearance of participation is just as important as the reality. So he speaks up occasionally, offering well-timed comments and asking pertinent questions. He never strays too far from the approved talking points, and he never speaks with such fervor that he attracts unwanted attention. Like a good actor, he plays his part, but he never reveals too much of himself. Only after he has had his fill does he ask for the report to be read aloud. Attaius excuses himself and returns home. He throws off his cloak and toga, revealing a simple white tunic underneath. He is perspiring, and a slave quickly hands him a sponge on a stick to wipe himself clean. He washes his hands, brushes his teeth, and dresses again in lighter garments. This time a dark linen tunic and a white cloak. Eats quickly, washing down bread, cheese, and olives with a glass of wine. He is expecting a delegation from the emperor's court, and he wants to be ready for them. Once he is satisfied that he looks and smells appropriately fresh, he takes his place on a couch in the atrium. 2 slaves flank him, each holding a small table laden with food and drink. On one side, a bronze ewer filled with wine. On the other, plates piled high with figs, dates, and almonds. Attaius eats slowly, savoring the sweetness of the figs and the saltiness of the olives. He sips wine and enjoys the way it warms his belly. But his eyes are alert, watching the approach of the imperial delegates. When they arrive, he greets them warmly, offering them food and drink, and showing them 2 seats of honor. Then he listens as they deliver their message from the emperor. He responds in kind, promising support and offering advice. And all the while, he calculates the implications of their visit. Even then, he does not always care to hear it, sometimes sending the slaves away, so that he can sit in peaceful silence. When he was younger, Titus was known for being energetic, quick to respond, eager to make a name for himself in Roman politics. But time has tempered his ambition, and now he is content to let others run hard, to let them exhaust themselves, while he keeps to the sidelines. The other senators have long ago mocked him for this lack of drive, calling him old before his time. Attaius only smiles and sips his drink. He knows something they do not. The game of Roman politics is one of endurance, and the hardest quality to maintain is not ambition, but patience. First, the salutatio. Clients arrive to greet him, to offer loyalty in exchange for favors. He listens, nods, promises nothing. Attaius must receive each one with proper decorum, greeting them by name, inquiring after their family, and finding out what brings them to his presence. Some come with news or information, others to report successes made possible by Attis's influence. A few come simply because they are required to. Attius remembers their faces, their names, and their interests, and he uses this knowledge to his advantage. To hear them speak of themselves makes them feel important, and importance is something that every Roman craves. Attius has no qualms about indulging them. He plays the part of the benevolent elder statesman, offering advice, making connections, granting favors. And all the while, he calculates the potential value of each man standing before him. This is the nature of Roman power. It is a transaction. Influence is bought and sold. And Attius has long been a master of the market. Later, he may attend the Curia, the Senate House. Debate is often ceremonial. Real decisions are shaped behind doors. Still, he speaks cautiously. He's too bold, and he gains enemies. Too quiet, and he loses influence. Lunch is simple. Bread, olives, perhaps a fish stew. Then a walk through the Portico Gardens. He reflects. Not on politics, but philosophy. Many senators consider themselves students of the Stoics. Control your mind, not the world. In the evening, perhaps at dinner with peers, reclining on couches, they discuss law, poetry, and politics. There is wine, but not too much. A slip of the tongue can unravel years of reputation. By nightfall, he is tired not from work, but from vigilance. Rome rewards image. The senator lives not by what he does, but how he is seen. And so his day ends in silence, with the flicker of a lamp and the echo of footsteps on marble. The sun has barely crested the Palatine Hill when Attius Verus stirs in his atrium. It is not that he has much to do, but rather the weight of doing nothing that threatens to crush him. He sits up, stretches his limbs, and signals for a slave to adjust the blanket covering his body. The chill of the early morning lingers even in Rome, and Attius prefers to be comfortable before his day begins in earnest. Slaves flit around him, adjusting his toga, helping him balance on his slippered feet. The toga, a large piece of woolen cloth, is a pain to Dan, but it is a necessary torment. As Attius sees it, it is better to suffer in silence than to speak out against such an accepted part of Roman life. Yet he cannot help but grumble under his breath about the ridiculous drape and bunching folds of the damn thing. With his toga finally adjusted to the point of passable decency, Attius Verus begins his day. He enters the atrium, a glass-enclosed courtyard at the center of his home, where sunlight filters through the glass and paints the marble floor in mosaic-like patterns. As the morning progresses, clients begin arriving at his house. This is the first major chore of the day. When the sun climbs higher in the sky, the clients depart, and Attius's slaves prepare him for his next engagement. At midday, the heat is stifling, and the arguments in the Curia have grown even louder. In the afternoon, the heat has begun to recede, and Attius Verus finds himself with little to do. Lie. The sun dips below the horizon, and the temperature in Rome begins to drop. As the evening wears on, the wine flows, and the talk becomes more animated. As the night deepens, the laughter grows quieter, and the conversation more subdued. Welcome. Tonight, we drift slowly back in time, through the warm haze of memory and marble, into the vast and varied world of ancient Rome. Not the Rome of sweeping epics and shining togas, but the quieter, more intimate Rome, the Rome of steam, sweat, and routine. The daily grind beneath the grandeur. Let your breath settle into a steady rhythm, and allow yourself to imagine the sounds and textures of an empire at work. Stone corridors echoing with footsteps, copper basins, brimming with tepid water, and the low murmur of conversations spoken in Latin. As we embark on this historical journey, we will explore 4 distinct corners of Roman life: the bathing rituals of the common man, the tangled ambition of a powerful woman, the whispered curses of the forgotten, and the slow ceremonial pace of the elite. This is not the story of Rome's triumphs, but of its daily tempo, its quieter realities, its strangely relatable imperfections. Let's begin.